Hi there. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how we can animate water droplet animation from imagination. And of course, I'm going to be using Procreate Dreams too. The first thing I want to mention is that humans don't know what a water droplet animation looks like in slow motion unless they actually watch a video of a slow motion. In other words, go with your guts. Unless it looks horribly bad, nobody's gonna feel that there's something wrong about it. The first thing I'm gonna do is the pathway for that water droplet. I'm gonna end with 5 frames for the impact. You can make it as random as you want. It's just that it needs to have a tail. I'll also go here to the flip book that has the guide, go to the layer inside it and drop down the opacity. You can make it a little longer to give a sense of speed, but this is what I have right now. Okay, and if you want, you can get a little artistic with it and just blur it out with the smudge tool, especially as it reaches the end. As you can see, of course, the settings here would play a big difference. So I have it set at around 40%. So notice how I don't blur this one, and maybe I'll gently blur this one. And this one I think is a little longer than it should be. So I start to blur it towards the middle and then here towards the end. So before I continue, the first thing I mentioned is that nobody is gonna police you if the water droplet is not perfect, because we humans can barely see it in action. It's very quick. It happens very quickly. Okay? It is so quick, nobody's gonna notice it. Second one is water doesn't lose its volume. It only changes its form or shape. So if the amount of water within a droplet is, say, 100%, after the impact, it would stay 100%, but in different form or shape or spread, okay? Unless we're talking about evaporation, then technically it would still be the same, but completely changing its form. So what that means is that when we have a water droplet, let's say the water droplet is this big, as it gets that impact, what we need to do is to think about the volume and the way it's getting reshaped. Meaning, if this splashes in, gets the impact, I cannot just anticipate that there will be a huge wave like that just out of it. In the meantime, and this is something I will talk about later, but I wanted to get that clarification beforehand. When there is an impact of the water droplet, it means that when you have a volume hitting here, you cannot anticipate out of this shape to have a wave this big, okay? The other thing is that when the droplet impact takes place, you gotta think about the viscosity of the water, the way it's getting stretched, okay? So if we get that shape, that means we can no longer assume that there will be a thick neck. Instead, the neck could possibly just mushroom. Always when you're done thinking and planning and drawing the effect, go back to the previous shape and make sure that it checks out. Similarly, we cannot have a shape this big and have an impact like that. It would make no sense. Unless you're doing some Chuck Jones weird wacky animation, then in that case the goal is to be funny, right? So this is the water droplet, and what I want to do is to change the form of this water droplet into something new, which is the impact of water on the ground. What's going to happen is an implosion where the force here is gonna go down, while these would be functioning as walls. By these, I mean these particles here that circle. It's gonna be like the wall. Think about it this way. If a car hits the wall or a light post, the new cars, they make them feel like made of cardboard, because when they are really, really fragile in a way, all the impact is going to happen here, and the driver and the passengers wouldn't get crushed, because this is the part that's going to take and soak up the damage. In the older cars, you can take it to war if you want, and then it would still be the same in perfect shape. It's actually a tank, right? But the problem is that the impact force is going to be soaked by the driver, and the driver would be the person just smashing through the window. Same thing happens here. The particles around are going to be like a bag, and then the velocity or the force here is going to go down and make that impact. So what does that mean as far as our animation? It means that this part here is going to go down, and these would be slowly losing their shapes. So let's break it down this way. Let's imagine that water droplet consists of two different shapes. The first shape is going to break down and get wider. Okay? So let's widen that. And as it gets wider, of course, it's gonna get shorter. That is the lower half of that water droplet. And the top half is now right here. But it's gonna be splashing through that bag, if you must. I'm gonna be making it like this. Okay, so this is the tail of that top side. And I'll keep the drawing loose from now on. So I'm just gonna remember my exercise of drawing with the non-dominant hand. It's always good to practice drawing really loosely. Next, it would start to spread. This is now the velocity effect, the implosion happening within that area inside the water droplet. And then that velocity is going to start to shoot out, but the walls of the water particles, the way they form, they're going to try to maintain. That is the viscosity effect. They're going to try to maintain as much of that fluid as possible. And therefore we start to have, if you were to see this droplet from top view, circle, right? It would start to form like a circle. Then we start to even see, this is top view. Gonna start to see some of those tentacles, because some of those particles are shooting really at high velocity, but the viscosity of the water is maintaining that. Let's start by drawing some of those tentacles. Now notice here, although I'm drawing really loosely, but I can still show some depth, meaning the line here is giving me that depth, meaning that this is a droplet, but it's shaping like a ball, right? So when I'm seeing, if you're seeing my hand like that, then there is this kind of ball effect that is like a cup, right? And instead of just focusing on this area, we're also seeing the ones in the far back. And right now, it may seem like we're overthinking it, but actually it makes a huge difference. In the meantime, notice how the shape, I gotta remind myself that the shape must be as big as the volume of the initial droplet, okay? Now, you don't wanna think about that blur. Right now, I'm only thinking about this overall, this big droplet. Now, this one seems a little bit small. I can simply just scale it up. Then go to the next one. I'll scale that one just a little bit up, but given that volume that I have right now, it starts to look like it's a lot larger than the actual droplet. And this is where we start to modify the neck. because we cannot have 110% out of 100% volume of water. Right? And I can shift it just a little bit to the left. And I don't think the arrow should stay there. Okay. So what's happening now is that the water droplets are trying to escape, and some of them actually manage to escape. So on the next frame, I'm going to start to show some of those who make it out of that bubble. This area is going to expand. And it's going to get thinner. And also the neck that has this shape is going to start to expand as well. As that neck expands over there here, right, that is going to take more volume. And therefore I cannot be too generous with how much I have here. So let's expand the neck placement or landing position if you must. And then in the meantime, I want to think about this blob to be moving like that. Then give it some randomness there. And then that shape here in the back is actually jumping higher to the point that one of the droplets from the velocity within is actually escaping. And when that droplet escapes from the bubble of viscosity, like it shoots out, there will be contraction here. The water viscosity is going to pull back the ones that don't have enough velocity to escape. So that's where we start to have splashes. Let me scale this down just a little bit, taking advantage of the digital format that we're using. And I'm gonna just keep it loose. So what's gonna happen here is that usually before we get that mushroom neck, the surface here, the concave, needs to have full contact. So I could possibly argue that it would be better to just go and touch the ground first. And even like give it some blobbiness there. Because once it touches the ground, then it's going to recoil. And I'll just erase this line here just to, for now. Okay. Okay, so when that impact happens, I need to look at the change between the position of the stem of that water droplet here versus the stem here, and therefore the difference should be here. So the one in between should have that stem there, because it's almost like something is squeezing the neck of the water droplet to get more of that, in a way, redistribution of the volume of the water particles, right? I have this thingy here that is really good for my wrist for keyboard typing. So if I'm looking at this thing, when I squeeze it, the particles or the pieces or the volume inside doesn't disappear, it just gets reformed into a new shape. And that's what I always have to keep in mind for the water. So the beginning here, the third is here, then therefore this has to be here. So that narrowing now that I'm getting becomes more reasonable. Now additionally, at this point I'm just gonna go to the onion layers and I'm gonna just show one frame ahead. I'm gonna increase the opacity. This way it's a little easier to view things. The more I can squeeze that neck, the higher the volume can go and reshape itself. What I can also do is just to focus on the reshaping or redistribution of the shape and think of it as just a bowl, salad bowl or something, or a cup. And then I can decide, aside from this droplet, then I can decide, you know what, I'll take a chunk here and I'll splash this into a wobbly water droplet, and then it's a surgery basically. We chop that piece and we make it throw itself out of that viscosity bubble there. Maybe this one would be, this one here could be reshaping itself into something like that. And remember that you can take full liberty in how you make your own water droplet. Because as I mentioned, nobody's really gonna see this in slow motion. You're making things up. Our goal is to make it believable. Now we're gonna keep track of this water droplet here, so it needs to be flying off. In the beginning, usually it's an oval shape, but as it starts to spin around, it starts to have a more circular shape. And I'm not using any reference at all, just my imagination and understanding of water. And I could be scientifically inaccurate in a way or another, but it doesn't matter. What really matters is that when I press the play button, and if it does look like a splash of water, then goal achieved. Okay, so what I have there, and let's say I'm happy with that redistribution. What I'm going to do is to go back to the pre-impact volume. Kind of checks out. It does look like it's consistent with the original volume. And now what I can do is I would anticipate in my head how many frames it would take for this to land, and then just focus on that. So then maybe within 2 frames this should be somewhere here. This way I don't have to track this, I can simply just go that. And then it would just vanish. Or actually I can even make it to be like that. And then the frame after, just a bump, spread out. Same here for this one. I'm gonna make it to vanish into the background. So somewhere here, go to the settings, change the onion skin, and then that would be somewhere here. Because it's flying off in the depth, it has to shrink in size because it's going into the Z depth. Next, what's the pattern here? Splash, impact, and then this cup is gonna have to die down. the viscosity here is gonna have enough weight to make it collapse down. And then it's gonna possibly form something like an umbrella, but I'm not really doing like super slow motion. I'm just gonna make a water droplet. I don't like how this feels staged, the droplet on the left side. And the way to mitigate that staged feeling is by simply going back. In a way, you fabricate the logic backwards, meaning I like how it's sort of shaping that way. I just need to give it more of a backstory. And because of the onion skin, that allows us to simply think, so this droplet here made its way out of this volume, and that was the original plan, but it just seemed out of nowhere, a little bit out of nowhere. So in that case, what I can simply do is to squeeze the neck here just a little bit, just enough so the eye can say, oh, I see where this is forming. Okay, so let's just watch this specifically. See if this trick here that I pulled would work just fine. Because of the direction of the velocity is that way, it felt that I can just push this just a little bit like that. Now notice the arc would be a lot healthier this way. Let's watch it. So it looks a little strange, and that's because the speed is too high, but the response makes it feel a little oily, meaning higher viscosity than water. What I'm about to do here is to add more frames for the droplet to make it feel just a little slower. Okay, let's see what that looks like. With it feeling a little slower, I don't think it looks bad. Let's do another exercise very quickly, but this time I'm gonna go extremely loose. I'm gonna go from right to left, and then the impact is gonna be a swoosh. Alright, that's it for today. Go have fun with water particles, and I'll see you in the next video.